Everyone ready to go? Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for this evening for the second in a six-part series. I'd like to thank our partners in this venture, Butler County Mental Health and Addiction Recovery Services Board, the Envision Partnerships Organization, and the Lakota Local School District. Some housekeeping details before we begin. Attendees will not be visible or audible. We're looking forward, though, to your participation through the chat room for any comments or concerns you might have. And if you have questions, we'll ask that you put those into the Q&A box on your screen, and we'll address those at the end of the presentation. So again, the Q&A box for your questions and the chat box for any comments or concerns you might have. And please let us know what you're thinking about the presentation as we go. We've also asked our presenters to put their contact information in the chat box, and that's already there if you would like to have that. One final comment to our attendees that are applying for professional CEUs: your time in and out of the conference is automatically recorded. Please address any questions that you might have to Joanna Lowry. You can find her contact information in the chat box. And there will be a very brief survey as you leave the meeting for those trying to find CEUs. In order to apply for that, you'll need to go ahead and complete that survey at the end. Last week, we took a look at the downside of social media with our keynote speaker, Michael Mercier, and we followed that with a panel discussion with students and experts, and then a wrap-up State of the County Mental Health Programming and Treatment by Dr. Scott Rasmus. Today's event, Technology 101, is presented by Kim Little. We'll follow that with a Q&A. We also have Justin Little and Nick Dryden with us. Kim is the Director of School and Juvenile Court Programs for Envision Partnerships. She's worked in the field of mediation and prevention for more than 30 years. Kim is the Director also of the Kids and Character Program, and I'm looking forward, Kim, to hearing your expertise today. Justin is a high school senior at Lakota West High School. He's involved in sports and music and volunteering. He plans to major in engineering in college. Justin, would you go ahead and bring up your video for us? He's actively involved in gaming as a hobby, and he's experienced the benefits and the cost associated with gaming and with internet usage. And Nick is a social work student. Give us a wave, Nick, at Miami University. He's currently interning at Envision Partnerships. Nick is an avid gamer. He has experience running online servers, hosting video games, and building computers. He also has experience operating computer milling machines. So we welcome you, Kim, Justin, and Nick, and look forward to what you're going to share with us today. Their complete bios for all of our speakers can also be found on the website at www.c3ohio.org under the event tab. Kim, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Linda. I'm really glad to be here with everyone today. I'm looking forward to talking with you about technology. So I will be going through a PowerPoint presentation, and I will share that in just a minute. And we will be really kind of doing an overview of various kinds of technology, internet, gaming, social media, things like that, to give you some background on it. And so there will be a lot of breadth, more as a technology 101 than getting into a lot of depth. But hopefully the information today you will find helpful. So we were going to start by telling you a little bit about our own personal experiences with technology, gaming, social media, and things like that. So I'm actually going to turn things over to Nick for a minute, and he is going to talk a bit about his experience around all of this.
Hi. So, as I said in my little bio, I'm a bit of an avid gamer. I've experience with like heavy gaming, which is gaming for long durations of time. In middle school, I used to game like 14 hours a day, especially during the summer. I had problems getting over a game called World of Warcraft, which had a couple of unique features about it that kind of lend it to be more of an addicting game. And I'd say that one of the reasons why I ended up not playing it as much as I don't play it anymore actually at all, would be I had a big change in friend groups in middle school that changed me. I ended up hanging out outside of school, doing more extracurricular activities, and I really started to enjoy school more than I did in early middle school. Um, I also have lots of friends who've had experiences with, like most recently, I've had some friends that have dropped out of college and because they have trouble controlling how much they game. So these topics are kind of close to me. And yeah.
Thanks, Nick. All right, Justin, you're next.
Yeah, so I'm kind of similar to him, but I've also been really not like that heavy in gaming, but I do play a lot of video games. And as a senior, and I'm also a virtual student, where it's like I have a lot more time to play video games because I don't get a chance to go talk to people at school. Um, so I'm just a lot or really familiar with gaming and stuff in the internet. So yeah.
All right, so I asked both of them to participate in this because they do have a lot of experience in this area. And as a professional, it's something that I'm really interested in, but it's also been something that's affected me as a parent. So it's kind of interesting to have my son on here and have the two of us talking about it together because, there's certainly been moments in our lives, like many of you, that we've had some conflict over gaming and the amount of time and things like that. So, I share many of your concerns and I've walked this journey myself. So hopefully the information that I'm able to share with you will be useful to you, but also know that especially as we get into the questions and answers, that we have personal experience with this, and all three of us will be happy to share some of that personal experience with you later. So I am going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay. So we just talked a little bit about ourselves, and we would like to talk a little bit more about just some anecdotes and some information. And Nick is going to talk about that in just a second. And then after we get through that part, then we're going to go through an overview of various technology issues. So we'll talk about social media and networking, sexting, the concerns around predators and sexual exploitation, cyberbullying, pornography, gaming, digital self-harm, and then we'll talk a bit about, and I'll also discuss this as I go along, technology and the pandemic and how the pandemic has affected us from that standpoint. And then we'll share some resources with you at the end. And finally, we'll have some time for some discussion and give you an opportunity to ask questions that we will hopefully be able to answer for you. Can everyone see that okay? Okay. All right, Nick, I'll go ahead and send it over your way.
Oh, I thought we just did this. Um,
Talking
so,
about the money-making ventures
oh,
and things
so
like
one of the big things that's been a motivator for people to for younger people in particular to become active social media presence, to be social media influencers or YouTube content creators, has been this idea that's a money-making venture. So there's several ways you can make money doing this. Whether or not it is, I would say, a rewarding venture, it depends on whether or not you have the personality to do so, or you have the following to do so. What typically happens is that people become, like the old term, they go viral. They become popular overnight, or they get associated with someone who is popular already, and they get lots of views, lots of likes, and it's a way that they can become monetized either through people donating through their streams or to their videos or to supporting their memberships on their YouTube channels, or through creating advertisement deals. So one of the big ones was with Ninja a few years ago. He had a deal with Samsung where they paid him several $1,000,000 just to be the sponsor of one of their smartphones. And this is the same thing with gaming companies and things like that. But it really comes down to advertisement revenue and things like that. esports is video game sports, and these are surprisingly very popular. In fact, they have more views on average in the National Football League, which is the most viewed sport in the world. And well, that makes esports technically the most watched sports in the world, although these aren't considered like Olympic sports or anything like that. With the way that the ad revenue works is it the same way that Facebook and Google ads work is they'll effectively use targeting ads. They'll partner with companies that support their gaming channel or their maybe their media influences. So these might be things like you may have seen like a Mr. Beast video or something like that, which these are videos that are so popular that even regular everyday people who don't follow these particular streamers or view or YouTube content creators may see their videos, but they'll be targeted with things that they support or ideas that they support, like the on a good note, I guess I should say, like the Plant a Tree Foundation thing, where they've been trying to plant 20 million trees. You may not be interested in what some of these content creators do, but you are interested in maybe environmental things, and you'll be targeted by their ads and by their videos because of that. These targeted ads are also huge sources of revenue for not only the content creators that make them, but for products and product creators. So like anything like a company like that's trying to sell a product, these ads are incredibly beneficial to monetarily, not only to the social media platform that they come from. So whether it be Google targeting you with ads or Facebook targeting you with ads, both the company and the company in charge of producing the products reap the rewards of these because it's just benefit by views. And these, like, in general, these contribute to a lot of the major proponents and a lot of the, well, not proponents, but a lot of the major reasoning for people wanting to do social media or YouTube content creation or live streaming and things like that. Because it can appear to be a really major source of income, but the rewards versus the risks are incredibly high, and it's the same chances of, like, again, because these are like professional level people, the chances of becoming these like successful content creators are very, very slim. There's also aspects of gaming and things that bleed into like how we view everyday life. So things like the Tetris effect. So this was a effect that was studied relatively recently where people play a game so long that they begin to see real life pieces of the world shape, like fit into shape. So with Tetris, they played Tetris so long that they saw the world in shapes, and they saw their lives organized according to how they would view puzzle pieces. And also video games more recently have become a measure of popularity, as in like Fortnite, where some social groups and friend groups will only be friends with you if you're really good in a video game, because how good you are in a video game has now become a measure of social status. And
then
Kim, I'll pass it back to you.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple other things. One of the things that I wanted to mention about esports is it is really popular on college campuses, and a lot of college students are playing esports, and they actually have a number of universities around the country that have esports majors. And then I wanted to also mention that when you think about like the targeted ads on Facebook and stuff like that, I don't know if you all have ever noticed, you'll be looking something up about a topic that you're interested in, and you then become targeted for products. So I've had times when I've looked something up on my phone and then I've gotten on my computer and all of a sudden I'm getting pop-ups for a product that was related to what I was looking for. So I think we've probably all experienced things like that. And as we know, the tech companies are definitely, and the advertising companies are definitely keeping an eye on what we're doing, and they're utilizing different types of computer algorithms that help them to determine what they should be targeting you with. Another thing that I wanted to mention is that in reading some books on this subject, I've read a lot about various tech experts, those who are designing all of these products that we're using. They actually tend to limit their own kids' exposure. In some cases, they don't let their kids use technology at all or be on the internet, be gaming. And in other cases, they limit it quite extensively. So it's interesting that they're creating it, but they also know how concerning it can be. So they do limit their own children's exposure and access to that. And if you've not played Tetris before, this is just a picture of the Tetris game where it has these blocks that drop. And going back to Nick was saying about the Tetris effect, people who are playing this a lot were beginning to see out in the real world, they would get these sensations and have these experiences where they were seeing these blocks falling before their eyes. So that's something that has been, a topic of concern and a topic of discussion in terms of how the gaming has kind of infiltrated our real life as well. I thought this was an interesting graphic. It shows you in a minute's time, they call it the internet minute, how many different, of all of these sites, what's being accessed. So if you look at something like Facebook, for example, there are 1 million people logging in within a minute's time. And then if you look around the circle, you'll see that all of those different sites, there are people, all kinds of people that are logging in, and people are on the internet constantly. So let's give you some general statistics about internet use. I thought that this was an interesting graphic. 45% of teens say they're online almost constantly. And that is different from the last statistic that I had was from 2018. But if you go back to 2014, 2015, you can see that it almost doubled. So there's been a lot that's happened within that period of time, and a lot of young people are accessing the internet all of the time, or almost constantly. And then you can also see that several times a day. That has gotten smaller, but that's because almost constantly has grown. In terms of accessibility, if you look at accessibility of desktops and laptop computers versus smartphones, this was from 2018. I suspect that as a result of the pandemic that this has changed somewhat. If you look at the desktop or laptop computers, US teens had 88% of them had access because so many people have had to transition to online school. We now have, probably a lot more teens that actually have access to those desktop or laptop computers or Chromebooks in most cases. And then the smartphones, as of 2018, 95% of teens had access to smartphones. So there was a case study done by Case Western Reserve up in Cleveland, and there was some interesting data. And I'll share with you a lot of statistics along the way because I think that the statistics really help you to get a sense of the extent of the issues that we're dealing with related to technology. So the Case Western study found that 20% of students were hypertexters, and hypertexters are defined as those who text more than 120 times per day. And then if you look at some of that information that goes along with it, those who are hypertexters who are texting much of the day, there's higher risk factors there. They're more likely to have had sex, have multiple sex partners, drinking, drugs, physical aggression. And they're also more susceptible to peer pressure. And they found that the parents tend to be a little bit more permissive with those kids. Then if you look at hyper-networkers, hyper-networkers are those that are on the internet all the time, or on those networks, or on social media. And that's 11.5%. And similar to those that are hypertexters, as you can see here, they also have a lot of risk factors as well. And then they had found that students who are not using social media or texting had better health outcomes. But as you've seen from some of the other demographics that I've shared, most kids are on there, but those that aren't do have those better health outcomes or experiencing better health. Okay, so the next topic that we're going to move into is social media and networking. Another point that I wanted to make before I talk a bit more about this is that 75% of children say that they're willing to share personal information online in exchange for goods or services. And I also think an interesting statistic is that 63% of teens say that they know they know how to hide what they're doing online from their parents. So that's 63%. And Nick, I don't know, you were gonna, I think maybe mention something about that.
Yeah, regarding the hiding from your parents, if I believe that statistic is probably going to only accommodate those who honestly say that, because if most teens probably know how to circumnavigate any parental control features that you have, whether it be disabling tracking on your phone or internet blocking sites. It's incredibly, as easy as they are to use the softwares, they're also very easy to get around. And I, so it is important to know that if you are using those softwares, you need to use secure passwords and also make sure that they are actively being used on the devices that you install them on. It's very easy for kids to remove them.
Yeah, kids know how to get rid of their browser history and things like that. So they may be doing things that you're not aware of, and they're pretty savvy at knowing how to hide it. All right, so here's an overview of some of the popular sites that kids and teens are using. You probably recognize a number of these, but these are the ones that young people tend to be using right now. So why are young people engaging in social media? And, you know, there's a number of reasons. So there are a lot of benefits to them. So it helps them connect with others. I go back to, like I mentioned about the pandemic, that when kids are home, when they're being quarantined, those who are virtual learners, it's giving them an opportunity to connect up with their friends and other people so that they're continuing to have those relationships. It helps them to kind of figure out who they are. Obviously, teenagers are going through a period in their life where they're trying to sort out their identity, and their access to social media is helping them to do that. It's a way that they express themselves, that they can get affirmation from others. Obviously, in Facebook, for example, the likes always makes a difference, you know, for some kids to find out how many likes they have. And then if they're dealing with some kind of emotional hurt or pain, they're struggling interpersonally with things, it's a place that helps them to kind of cope emotionally and be able to express those emotions. And another thing is, you know, along with that is just kind of escaping the realities of life. If they're dealing with trauma in their life or other kinds of challenging life circumstances, it becomes an escape for them. And then it's a way that kids are communicating. That's just pretty much what's happening right now. And then, you know, that may be a way that they're connecting and building relationships with potential partners as well. Okay, so what are some of the risks with social media and networking? So Nick had mentioned before the targeted advertising. You know, the young people are being targeted for things that we probably don't want them to be targeted for. So it might be alcohol. Obviously, marijuana is something else that kids are, you know, because of their social media profiles, those who are wanting to target them have a lot of opportunity. So those things are popping up. They're getting those pop-ups, and then they begin to open those up, and sometimes it can lead them down a slippery slope. So
Yeah,
some of the, go ahead.
Vaping products too have seen a huge spike in advertisement online as well. I would say less on the marijuana, but maybe like CBD capsules, especially in states where it's legal. Those are popping up on, even on YouTube ads.
Yes, thank you. Then also sexting, which we'll get into. We'll talk about several of these things: cyberbullying, online predators. There are certainly risks of overuse. There's question about, and we'll talk about this later as well, can there be an internet addiction? But whether there's addiction or not, you probably have experienced some people that you know that you would say definitely overuse it or seem to be obsessed with it. A lot of times young people and even some of us adults are staying up late. We might be on our phones, we might be up on our computers, so that's affecting our sleep. Another thing that can happen is young people are developing kind of fabricated selves. So they create a profile to make them look like somebody that they're not. So they might even, for example, create a profile that makes them look like they're an adult, and they put themselves out there as being something different. It affects their judgment. They may not be making the best judgment when they're on there. They're getting exposure to potentially inappropriate images and behaviors. And then there's the health dangers of too much time gaming, too much time sitting, being, on their phones, that it can lead to things like obesity, heart disease, and other kinds of behaviors. And if they're experiencing negative things when they're online, that may affect their own behaviors and how they interact with others. Here is a graphic on what teens are posting. And this was from 2012, so I know that that was several years ago. And I'm hoping that some of these numbers have actually gone down since that time. But a lot of young people were posting photos of themselves, their school name, their city or town, email addresses, cell phone numbers, things like that. And, I think that over the last few years that there's been many of us as parents and as professionals and teachers that have been talking with young people about the importance of not posting personal information. But they're still out there doing that. But let's hope that it's less. Okay, so what are some things that you can do as a parent? So one of the things that you can do is monitor your own use. Be a good role model as a parent. And I will say that there have been times when my own kids have gotten a little bit frustrated because I was on my phone, or maybe I was doing work and texting or on my computer for a long time, and they just want some attention. And so they have to remind me that I need to get off and pay some attention to them. So I think we as adults can be just as guilty as the kids are in spending too much time on social media or on the internet. So we want to make sure that we're good role models. The other thing is monitoring their use and knowing what's going on with them. And this is a difficult subject because especially when you're dealing with teenagers, they want their privacy. And there's challenges around that because as parents, we want them to be gaining their independence, but at the same time, we want them to be safe. So it's finding that balance between allowing them to have some level of privacy, but also us being on top of what it is that they're doing to make sure that they are safe. And I think a lot of that can happen through having really open dialogue and discussion. And I'll talk more about this as we go along, but that is really important. So monitoring them, but making sure that they're a part of that and that they understand what it is that you're doing and why you're doing it. So it's ideal to set those boundaries and rules when they're young, because if you begin to set the boundaries and rules when they're 16 years old, many of us who are parents know that you're going to get a lot of pushback at that point. So it's important to create that structure and create those boundaries when they're young so that they understand all the way along that you will continue to have boundaries for them. But at the same time, and this is something that Justin and I have talked a lot about, is that we want them to begin to set boundaries for themselves. So I've got a senior in high school. I realize that when he goes off to college, I'm not going to have the ability to limit the amount of time that he's playing video games. So he needs to learn how to set those boundaries for himself. So again, that comes from discussion with your child about what those boundaries look like and begin to help them place their own boundaries. So when they are off on their own, then they are able to accomplish that. So using parental control settings, becoming familiar yourself with technologies, the platforms, the different sites, the more awareness and familiarity that you have, the better, because that is going to help you to help your child navigate all of this. We talked about talking about it, making sure you have your kids' passwords, teaching them to keep their information and passwords private, and also make sure that they have privacy settings, that only their friends are able to get on and communicate with them and not other people that may be strangers. And then setting time limits. Okay, next topic is sexting. So what is sexting? So sexting is when young people are sending explicit images to one another. So it may be an image, it might be a video, but they're sending this. So you might have a couple kids that are in a relationship with each other, and they're sending these explicit images back and forth. 1 in 5 teens who receive a sext share it with others. So if you think about, you might have a daughter that's in a relationship and has sent a explicit picture to her boyfriend, for example. And if you think about, that's 20% of those boys will then share it with someone else. And then 20% of teens have sent or posted nude photos, which goes along with that. So it's quite pervasive. So why are they sexting? So a lot of times they are sexting because they want to get attention and they want that other person to like them. So 76% of girls have said that that is why they're sexting, and 57% of boys have said that. So the majority of them are doing this because they want the attention from that other person and they want that person to like them. And they might be afraid that if they don't, that person will break up with them. So federal laws prohibit it. It is illegal. And that it is actually considered child pornography. In the case of the state of Ohio, a couple years ago had introduced the bill, and it has passed, and the governor signed it, against sexting. So there are laws against sexting in the state of Ohio as well. And the laws relate to either child pornography, child endangerment, and dissemination of harmful material to minors. So the type of law that actually applies just depends on the circumstances. The Ohio law defines a minor as being a person younger than 18. And the interesting thing is that sexting is considered a felony. And the law, Ohio's law, does not distinguish between the acts that were committed by adults or youth. So your child, if they're sexting, they can be charged with a felony. All right, let's talk about revenge porn. So what is revenge porn? So that would be, for example, if your daughter breaks up with her boyfriend and then they had been, as I mentioned before, they had been sexting each other, and then he shares it with someone else to get back at the girl that broke up with him. So that would be revenge porn. So they're sending it out, they're distributing it to get back at the person that broke up with them. Revenge porn is illegal in 34 states. And Governor Kasich signed a House Bill 497, which was the first revenge porn ban. And the legislation actually makes it illegal to knowingly distribute a private sexually explicit image of a person without the individual's consent. And most of those are actually misdemeanors. The more that it happens, the higher level of misdemeanor it is. All right, so sextortion is the practice of extorting money or sexual behaviors by threatening to reveal evidence of sexual activity. So a perpetrator might say, I have these images of you and I'm going to publish it unless you send me $1,000. So that's sextortion. And in a lot of cases with sextortion, they don't even have those images, but there might be that fear around the fact that they might. So if they're saying that they do, then the person may be fearful that somehow they got access to them and that they could potentially distribute that. So then let's talk about self-harm and the mental health effects to all of these things that we just discussed. So it might lead to bullying. If your child has, if there was an image that your child had shared with someone, other kids might find out about it. They might start to bully the child. It affects the perception of their reputation. And it also can really affect their mental health and their self-esteem. So when this has occurred, it's double the likelihood of anxiety and depression that can occur. It obviously increases just psychological distress in a child in general. There's associations between sexting and other unhealthy behaviors, like multiple sex partners, lack of contraception, delinquency, alcohol and other drug use, and smoking. And there was a study that was done in Norway, and they found that sexting teens experienced 4 times more physical violence when they became adults. And this study was interesting because it really looked at people who were engaged in sexting. How did that affect them as adults? And those teens that were sexting were 2.5 times more likely to experience sexual abuse, 3.5 times more likely to experience psychological violence, and they are more likely to become a victim of intimate partner violence. So with predators and sexual exploitation, let's talk about what predators are. So predators are basically people that are experts at manipulating our kids and befriending them and drawing them into some kind of a relationship. And fake accounts, fake accounts are really easy to make. So they create fake accounts and they make themselves look like they're a child when they're actually an adult. And they're trying to lure that child into some kind of a relationship with them, oftentimes with the hope of meeting up with that child at some point. The other thing that can happen is that kids and teenagers may be making fake accounts to make themselves look older. So then they might have access to other adults, adult images and things like that, because they've created a fake account that has made them look older than what they are. So these predators prey on the children's need to be liked, loved, accepted, and to explore their sexual curiosity. 1 of 5 teens who use the internet regularly have indicated that they've received unwanted sexual solicitation. 76% of predators are 26 or older. 47% are 20 years older, 20 years or more older than the victim. And then 83% of those who were victims of this went somewhere willingly to meet the predator. And it's not just girls where this is happening. 30% of the victims of sexual exploitation are boys. One other thing I wanted to mention, I'll go back to that, is that some of the tactics that are used to entice children, these are kind of red flags, is that they'll engage in sexual conversation, role playing. They're basically trying to groom that child, asking for a child to send them sexually explicit videos or pictures of themselves. They'll develop a rapport with them through compliments, talking about shared interests and things like that. They may be sending sexually explicit pictures of themselves. They also, as I mentioned, they pretend to be younger. And so they're trying to build a relationship and make the child feel like there's some kind of commonality between them. And they might be offering incentives like gift cards or alcohol or drugs, food, lodging, things like that. So cyberbullying. Cyberbullying is using electronic communication to bully a person, typically by sending messages of an intimidating or threatening nature. So almost half, about 47% of youth have received messages online that are intimidating, threatening, or malicious. And there's a connection as well between intensive social media use and cyberbullying and mental health. So there was a European study that was done where they found that 12.2% of victims of cyberbullying viewed websites related to suicide versus 3.7% of those who are not victims of cyberbullying. So there was, a pretty significant amount of people who were victims of cyberbullying who were looking up information about suicide. 17.7% of victims viewed websites related to self-harm versus only 5.7% of those who were not the victims of cyberbullying. So those who are the victims had much more of a, they were much more actively looking for information about self-harm. And young people under 25 who are victims of cyberbullying are more than twice as likely to self-harm and attempt suicide than those who are not. So the next thing that I wanted to mention, this goes along with the cyberbullying, and I just recently found out about this. I had not heard this before, but there's something called digital self-harm. And digital self-harm is actually basically kind of cyberbullying by the person themselves. So what they're doing is they are harming themselves, like they are putting mean and hurtful comments about themselves and posting those like on their own sites. So it's basically bullying themselves online. There was one study that found that 6% of teens are actually engaging in digital self-harm. Another study that was done of freshman students found that 9% of them were engaging in digital self-harm. So these young people may be struggling with mental health issues like depression, PTSD, emotion regulation challenges. They might also be dealing with a sense of insecurity, anxiety, and loneliness, and it becomes somewhat of a coping mechanism for them. The other thing is this self-harm might be linked to suicidal ideation. Now, not necessarily. So when kids are cutting themselves, when they are digitally self-harming, that doesn't mean that they're suicidal, but it certainly is a concern where that needs to be addressed, and someone needs to see why they're doing that and make sure that they're not having the suicidal ideation. But obviously the reason for them harming themselves needs to be addressed. So why are they doing this? In some cases, it's to get the attention from other people, to prove that they can take it, that they can take people saying mean and hurtful things to them by saying it to themselves. It's kind of a way for them to feel like it makes them a little stronger. To get other people to worry about them. Maybe they're doing it as a joke. It might be used to start a fight. The other thing is it might be used to cope with some of the mental health challenges or other psychological kind of issues that they're dealing with. And it helps them to validate their insecurities. So it's a concern if a child is doing that, and it's important that we find out why it's happening and that we help them address the underlying mental health issues or concerns that's leading them to do that. One other mention about that with the digital self-harm is risk factors. So those who are at risk of doing this, some of those risk factors are sexual orientation. Maybe they're being bullied somewhere, like at school. The cyberbullying, they may be engaged in drug use or other deviant behavior, and depression. So that may also be leading them into some of these behaviors. What are some of the things that you can do? I'm sorry to flip back there. What are some of the things you can do to address it? So if you find out that you have a loved one that is engaging in digital self-harm, you want to, first of all, in general, you want to be monitoring their social media, find out what's happening, having those conversations. And as I said, this will be something that I will continue to bring up, that those conversations between parents and children are really critical. As a parent, as you discuss these things with your child, avoiding judgment, and it can be hard because we may find out that our child is doing something that is really distressing to us. And we want to make sure that we are talking with them in a way that makes them feel comfortable to come to us and discuss these things that they're going through. Helping your child to build a support system beyond their parents. So having other adults in their lives and positive friendships that can help them to deal with whatever it is that is going on. And then also to get professional help. If these kinds of things are happening, it's probably good to talk to a counselor and to find out if it's somebody that specializes in addressing these kind of concerns. All right, so the next section is talking about pornography. And this is a hard topic to talk about. And I think that as we go through this, I do share a lot of statistics in here, but I think it's important to see those statistics to understand how pervasive this is in our society and with our children. So I wanted to start with a quick story about Lamar Odom. And you may all be familiar with him. He's an NBA champion, an Olympic gold medalist, reality TV star. I think he was on Dancing with the Stars. He was married to Khloe Kardashian. And so he is somebody that, especially young people, a lot of people know who he is. And he's had a lot of difficulties throughout his life with drug addiction and pornography addiction. And so he does share his story on a site called Covenant Eyes that I think is a very interesting story, where he talks about how difficult this has been for him. You might have heard a couple of years ago that he had taken substances that caused him to pass out and almost die. He was in a brothel. And he was in a coma and put on life support. And it was pretty miraculous, I think, that he came out of it. But I think that that was a turning point for him, where he began to make some changes in his life. But one of the things that he talks about is how difficult kicking the habit or the addiction of pornography has been. And people who are utilizing pornography, it really does become very addictive to them. And he was saying that, you know, it gets to the point where you prefer the pornography over being in a relationship with another person. So, you know, he's talked about that he would be there with his girlfriend and he'd be preferring to look at the pornography than spending the time with his girlfriend. And he also had mentioned that he would have times when he was late going to games and he was fined $5,000 each time because he was too caught up in watching pornography. So if you want to look him up and his information, and I will give this this info at the end, but he got help from an app called Covenant Eyes that actually you download it onto your devices, and it helps to prevent you from accessing those kinds of sites. All right, so this is from 2010, but I think that it's interesting information, and I think it still applies today. That they found that in a study that was done, 88.2% of leading pornography scenes had physical aggression, 48.7% had verbal aggression, and 94.4% of the aggression was directed against women and girls. This is a very interesting statistic to me. 97% of men acknowledge having viewed pornography. And I spoke to a counselor that had quite a bit of expertise on this. And one of the things that he said that he had heard from another expert was the comment that 97% of men have viewed pornography and the other 3% are lying. 65% of women acknowledge having viewed pornography. The average exposure was age 12, and some researchers believe that it is as young as age 8. The accessibility of pornography is astounding for our young people. 90% of youth ages 8 to 16 have viewed porn, and the largest consumer of internet porn are youth ages 12 to 17. 93% of boys and 62% of girls were exposed to internet pornography as an adolescent. 80% of 15 to 17-year-olds had numerous exposures to hardcore porn. And 64% of 13 to 24-year-olds said that they actively seek out pornography at least weekly. Few more statistics. This is my last page of statistics. 60% of young people surveyed said they viewed porn at home. And that's what we were talking about before, that you may not realize it's happening, but there's a very high chance that it is. 29% said it was at a friend's house. 71% of teens said that they came across it even when they weren't looking for it. 75% said that their parents have never discussed pornography with them, or internet pornography in particular. 87% said that no one in their lives is helping them to avoid it. 54% said they wouldn't know who to go to if they were dealing with this issue. And just kind of a last statistic here that I thought was interesting from an adult standpoint, 56% of divorces involve one spouse that has an addiction to pornography. So what is the effects that pornography has on children and adolescents? It impacts their brain. It increases their risk of developing sexually oriented compulsions and addictive behaviors. There's an earlier onset for kids engaging in sexual behaviors. They may trivialize rape because you're seeing those kind of images in pornography. It's linked to sexual aggression. There's also a correlation between viewing porn and having those feelings and that sense of loneliness and depression. The other thing that I've heard quite a bit is that it creates unrealistic expectations in their sexual behavior and relationships, meaning that they're seeing all of this pornography and they're having expectations that that is what a healthy relationship looks like, and that's completely inaccurate. So they're seeing a lot of things that we don't want them to see, and it's confusing them about what appropriate sexual behavior is and what healthy relationships are. I think that this is just helpful to look at in terms of what happens in this psychology of, or this cycle of psychological addiction. And this could be addiction to a number of things, but if you think about it from the context of pornography, that maybe they're seeking this out because of their emotional pain and they're craving release from that pain that they're experiencing, then they become preoccupied with it. They become compulsive as that cycle continues. It may help them to feel some relief as they're doing it, but then there are negative consequences as a result of that behavior, and those negative consequences then begin to lead to more pain and low self-esteem. And then they have this sense of depression, guilt, or shame, and you can see how it becomes this cycle. And that is how that cycle of addiction surfaces. So what are some warning signs that your child may be viewing pornography? Maybe if they are unusually curious about pornography or other things that are related, or sexuality. Signs of premature sexual activity. If they're accessing your credit card, you might find some unusual charges on your credit card that maybe you thought didn't come from anyone in your family, but they actually did. They might start getting, or you might start seeing on your computer, inappropriate pop-ups coming up, which would then lead you to believe that someone has been accessing those sites, because you are now starting to see those pop-ups, that are coming from that. Like we had talked about before, how you get targeted. So once you start looking it up, you're now targeted, those pop-ups are coming in. If another thing to think about is if you walk into the room and your child is quickly changing their computer screen or hiding their computer screen, that may not be exactly what they're doing, but that might be a sign to you that there's something going on that they don't want you to see. And the other thing that happens is, they begin to feel some sense of guilt because of their behavior, and they might become more secretive, they might be more defensive. You might begin to see behavioral changes where you feel like, this is not my child. Why is my child acting like this? This is not typical behavior for them. That could be a sign that there's something like this going on. All right, so to get help, and this is something that I've brought up several times, the most important factor in reducing usage among teens is a warm and communicative parent-child relationship. You want to make sure that you're having calm, non-judgmental conversations. If your child is engaging in pornography, it's tough. It's going to be a really tough conversation to have, but it's really important. And to have those conversations even before they might be accessing it, thinking about how to engage in that conversation appropriately, it's really important. I think it's a topic that a lot of us don't want to talk about, or a lot of us don't want to believe that it's happening. But as you saw, the chances that this is occurring is probably very, very high. Make sure that you discuss the rules with your child, install parental controls and filters and apps. And then there are therapists out there that specialize in chronic sexual behaviors and pornography addictions. So you would want to, contact a counseling agency and ask for someone specifically that deals with these kinds of issues. Okay, gaming. So who is gaming by gender? And you can see that you might be surprised that there's a lot of girls that are gaming. I saw as high as 45% of females are gaming. And, it's primarily boys, but there's still a lot of females that are engaging in that. So here are some statistics on gaming. So 90% of kids are gaming. They're engaging it in some way or another. And 97% of teens are gaming. Adults that are gaming, 86% of young adults are gaming. And those are the 18 to 24-year-olds. And 65% of adults in general have played online games. And nearly half of Americans over the age of 50 are playing video games, which I found that kind of surprising because video games haven't been around all that long. But there are a lot of adults that are gaming as well. 60% of Americans play games daily, and the average age for gamers is 30, which, there are a lot of those 20-somethings and older who are playing these video games as well. So games are designed to keep you hooked. They want to hook you. They want to keep you playing. There's a benefit for them to keep you playing. So they're set up so that it's really hard for your kids to get off. And I certainly have had the experience with Justin where Justin will say, 1 more minute, 1 more minute, 1 more minute. And then I walk away and, 45 minutes later, I go back and he's still playing. So sorry, Justin. But, I think that we've probably, if your kids are gaming, you've probably experienced that. 90% of games that are rated 10 or above contain violence. And some interesting neurological research shows that there are similarities between the brains of people who have addictions to addictive substances and avid video gamers. Some countries have actually recognized excessive gaming as a disorder, and they've established treatment programs along with it. And this country is starting to do that as well. But in general, asking the question, is internet and gaming addiction a real thing? And there's been a debate about that. There's still a debate about that. So internet addiction has not been recognized as an official disorder or diagnosis. And there's some question around people that are on the internet all the time or people that are gaming. Is there an addiction or disorder around the gaming, or is it masking some kind of an underlying problem, an underlying mental health condition? So that's where there's still some confusion around that. The World Health Organization has officially recognized gaming disorder as an addiction. So that has been recognized. In the United States, those of us who are providers, mental health providers, work in the social services, we're familiar with the DSM-V, which is through the American Psychiatric Association, that is used to diagnose mental health and psychiatric disorders. It is not officially listed, but it's currently under review and recommended for more research. So gaming addiction in particular, they are studying. The only behavioral addiction that is in the DSM-V is gambling addiction currently. So the DSM-V criteria for an addiction or a disorder around gaming, this is, like I said, it's not a diagnosis, but these are the things that they say that you should look out for. So things like lying about game usage, a sense of anxiety or guilt, that higher tolerance. I'll kind of start from the top. I know I don't have a lot of time before question and answers, but that preoccupation or obsession, withdrawal symptoms when they're not playing, having a sense of tolerance for gaming where they have to keep ramping it up because they're kind of becoming desensitized to it. At least one failed attempt to stop or cut back, a loss of interest in other life activities, overuse of games, even though it's impairing some other aspect of their lives. So it may be getting in the way of relationships with others, them doing their school, being involved in activities, lying to others about it, like lying to their parents about how much they're playing or what they're playing, using gaming to relieve a sense of anxiety or guilt. Relationships have been lost or risk because of gaming. So, you know, they may have lost friendships, or they might be in a relationship with someone and they're not really keeping in touch with that person because they're spending too much time gaming. And it's certainly that impact that it has on the person's life in general. You know, those would be things that you want to be looking for to determine if your child or someone you love has a potential issue related to gaming. Here are some of the risk factors that might make someone more likely to have a gaming disorder. Personality characteristics that have to do with mental health, being male, using gaming to manage their moods, like kind of as the escape, depression and anxiety, lower grades in school, positive views of their intelligence, but negative views of their competencies in social situations. So they might have some social anxiety. They may have more authoritarian parents. Playing online games, especially those multiplayer games, can be really, you know, they could really have an obsession with it because they're getting on, they're playing with other people, it becomes a competition. There can be neurobiological tendencies that makes them more susceptible to have a gaming disorder, and concerns around like social skills, empathy, emotion regulation. So that might put someone more at risk of having this gaming disorder. All right, so relationships between gaming and mental health. It can become a problem. It can co-occur with other mental health disorders. It leads to inactivity. These are some of the things that we talked about before, just in terms of related to internet use, social media, and all of that. So you can see that these are all really similar related to gaming. And just another quick note that there are positives. So gaming isn't all bad. And I think that we found during the pandemic that our children have you know, spent more time gaming to build their relationships with others. It's been a coping mechanism for them. It kind of helps with their creativity and their cognitive skills. It helps them build community with others. Interestingly enough, less than 1% would actually qualify as having a gaming disorder. So in hearing all of this, you might think that it would be more than that, or you might be experiencing something that's making you feel like it would be more children that have it. But what they're saying is that people who would be officially diagnosed with a gaming disorder is a very small percentage. What you need to look at is that gaming causing distress in their lives? Is it causing damaged relationships? Is it causing problems within the family? Those are the things that you want to look at.
Kim, I'm going to stop you there. I want to be sure that we have enough time to actually get some questions in, and I want to remind our listeners that they are welcome to post any questions in the Q&A box. I just want to say, Kim, amazing amount of information, and some of the numbers were stunning in so many ways. I'd like to hear from Justin and Nick, if I can, just for a moment about some of the things that you were talking about. And I'm going to go back to one of the numbers that really stuck out for me was the 47% cyberbullying, that 47% of our youth have been through that, which is, I'm sure as a professional, a stunning number for you as well. So Nick and Justin, can you talk about that? Is that something you've experienced? And if it is it something that you can share how you've dealt with it? And Kim, as a parent, I'd love to hear your perspective on that too.
That's something I've dealt with before. So cyberbullying and bullying at this point, with how prevalent technology is, it's just synonymous. One goes with the other. There isn't a way to be removed of both, or have one or the other anymore. So just assume that bullying at this current time is cyberbullying in some form, and paired with in-person bullying as well. I left seventh grade because I was bullied. I I left seventh grade. I went to homeschool. I did virtual learning in seventh grade with K through 12. Um, and when I came back, the people that were bullying me were like completely different people. I think seventh grade is a really big transitional year for people. I ended up being with friends with more than half of them at that point. And it's with that came cyberbullying. I was called names online and things like that, and I was targeted on social media, on Facebook, and that was during the early days of Facebook too, where there wasn't content filtering. Because modern, more updated, and I guess especially in the last 2 years, Facebook has gone on. They've been using their resources to prevent harassment and bullying. They have reporting systems now they didn't have back in the day. And I think even when I had a Facebook, I wasn't actually supposed to be allowed to have a Facebook. You had to be 14 to have one, back then. Now they have Facebook for kids, so that's allowed. So for me, no one who had a Facebook was supposed to have one, was even allowed to have one by Facebook standards. And that's something that they really, still to this day, they still push that. If you're making an account with a fake birth date, that they can't prevent that because it's supposed to be a free text media and stuff like that. But it's against their policy. They don't support it. Um, it was definitely hard to get over. But a lot of that time when I was gone, I made new friends with homeschool kids and also with Boy Scouts and things like that. And I think that having, I guess, that escape from the fact that social media can't follow you if you don't follow the people in real life, which is something that a lot of people may have trouble with today, because it is so much more embedded in our lives. But back then, at least, and when I was in middle school, when you got off of social media and you didn't see those people in real life, they were, not a problem. And I wasn't using social media because I wasn't talking to the people that I was talking to in school every day. So for me, it was when I came back in eighth grade to the school that I was going to before, it was like a complete 180 from what it was. And maybe it was from a fresh perspective, or maybe because I had grown relationships outside of that, or maybe because I craved a lot more social, in-person social contact. I really hadn't had it for over a year. Um, that for me was like the foundation for, like, I don't know, building a more healthy social communication, and also kind of not it being interested in social media all too much. Because I think that's the age that if you were to be interested in a social media presence, like and be a socialite with that, that's what came from that, was that young and early adoption of it. But I was fortunate enough to have that in the extent that most kids did. And I didn't even get a smartphone until I was in 11th grade. So for me, it was like it was years without that active social media influence. And I think because of that, I escaped years of possible bullying. Although I don't think I was a hated person or a bullied person in high school in person. I don't think I was ever bullied in high school, in fact, in person. But it's just one of those things that the more you expose yourself and the more you give of yourself online, the more you also are putting yourself out to be targeted.
Thank you, Nick. Appreciate you sharing a personal experience like that. Justin, how about you? Is that something you've experienced? And if so, how did you deal with it?
Yeah, so about the cyberbullying, I've seen people being really toxic, and I have had people be toxic to me, but it's kind of an environment where you learn that it teaches you not to be sensitive and just to kind of just get over it, and like, who cares? These people are also probably really low self-esteem. It's like, you know, just take it, and like, who cares? They're just gonna say what they want to say. Um and personally for me, gaming has always been like an outlet, because now that I'm virtual, I haven't talked to like any of my friends from school at all, and I only talked to like a few kids who are virtual, and one of my closest friends is virtual. So, and the really only people I talk to are like my piano teacher or just the people I play video games with. So it's kind of an outlet for social activity for me, but like it does make me, like depressed being at home and not being at school or seeing people. So it's just an outlet for me personally.
I think too.
Go ahead, Kim.
So I was just going to say that with the cyberbullying, I know that Justin has shared with me comments, and I actually shared this last week, but comments that people make online, like if they lose a game to you, he's had people that'll say things like, go kill yourself.
Yeah.
Those kind of comments. So in a sense, I'd say that that's a type of cyberbullying.
Mhm.
But I work with a lot of young people, and a lot of times, especially the girls that I talk to, will talk a lot about comments, cruel comments that people are posting. That's pretty common.
Okay, thank you. And Justin, thank you for sharing that. Kim and Justin, I want to ask you another question. Last week, I was impressed with your insightfulness, Justin, during our panel discussion. You were talking about how important it was to find the balance. And I think that you reminded all of us about how important that is. So I know that you're a big gamer. Your mom's talked about that. And it sounds like between the two of you, you've done a good job of what does that balance need to be. So for parents who are watching, how did you find that balance between the two of you? Can you address that? Kim's smiling, so that was probably maybe not a one and done conversation, Kim, but maybe over a period of time, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
And would you say the best tool that you had was good communication between the two of you?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And, I think, as I mentioned before, that, knowing that he's a senior in high school, I've certainly had concerns around, where we've really helped him to place those boundaries. And will he be able to do that when he's in college? So there's been a lot of conversation around that, a lot of trying to work together to come up with plans that make sense for him. And, I think that I think one of the things that's really important is that in addition to the communication piece that I've talked a lot about, I think it's also really important that our kids are involved in activities that don't involve technology. And Justin can probably talk more about that here in a second, but I think that him being involved in sports and playing the piano, like he was saying, his piano teacher, his guitar teacher, they're doing it virtually, but he has other people in his life to connect with and talk to. And I'll hear him downstairs, for the first 15 minutes of his piano lesson, just sitting and talking to his piano teacher about what's going on in his life. And so, I think that making sure that we don't want to take technology away from our kids because it's just too much a part of our society, but it's finding that balance and making sure that they are engaging in healthy activities, outside of the technology. And so I think that that's a key to finding that balance and making sure that they have those contacts with others that are adults that can help to help them to build positive communication and relationships.
Okay, thank you. So it sounds like it's a work in progress. Does that make sense? Something that has to be kind of an ongoing conversation?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay,
for sure.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
definitely a work in progress. And it's not something that there's a one and done, you talk about it and it's
right.
done. And
Yeah.
the pandemic has made things more challenging around that because where
Sure.
we used to have rules that there's no video gaming during the week. Well, now that's the way that he's connecting with friends. So we realize that that's important. So you need to think not only about your own interests as a parent, which are really important, but what is needed and important for your child as well, and trying to find that balance.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. I think a lot of us as parents think back on, my boys are both out of the house, but I certainly think back on those conversations and say, I'm glad we had those and that we were able to have that kind of communication with each other too. We have a question in the chat box, which I'll share with you. Sorry, Nick's already given a great answer to that question. Nice job, Nick. But I'm going to throw it out then. Nick, I agree with your response there. I'll throw it out to Justin. Do you have any advice if your child's goal is to be a professional gamer and content creator? How do you set boundaries that still enable them to work toward their goal? And Kim is laughing again, so this may have been a conversation already, but without letting gaming take over too much of their time. And this parent said that they currently limit it to 1 hour per weekday and 3 hours on the weekend. And I'll share Nick's answer after we hear from you, Justin. What's your advice?
So are they saying the student wants to be one, or
Wants to be a content creator and professional gamer.
okay? I don't know how to answer this. Well, I know like the games I play, there's one called Global or Counter-Strike Global Offensive, and it's a esports game. And I watch a lot of professionals play those games, and just any game, like there are professionals who play it who probably make like a lot of money off of the game. And I mean, if that's what the student wants to do, it's just a hard thing to answer, because it's like if that's what they want to do with their life, I mean, then it's just a really hard topic. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just I know that it would take a few years. Like a lot of the people who make a lot of money, like Ninja, are all Twitch streamers, and it takes them a few years to like get a basis and like a good solid community of viewers. So it would take time, but I don't know. And if they were a professional gamer, I know the people who play the games I do, they play like 8 hours a day practicing with their team. So they're spending a lot of time staring at a screen. And it does take a commitment. I know on one of the teams, one of the top teams for a game I play, one of the kids is like 15 or 14, and they still go to school. And then on top of that, they come home, they have to, train with their team for 8 hours, and then probably have homework too. So it's a really big time commitment. And you, on top of that, you have to be good at the game. So I don't know.
So one of the things that I think Nick's in agreement with you, Nick. One of the things, or Justin, one of the things that Nick said was, you're more likely to get drafted by the NFL than to make a livable wage on YouTube ad revenue. So I think that's a really important point. Nick's also suggesting that you encourage your child to follow it professionally so that they have the skill to really stand out. If they're interested in media, you can also pursue film or commentary, marketing, whatever you can do to get an extra edge in there, maybe to find out if that really is where your niche is. So great advice from both of you.
Yeah, and I would
Go
note
ahead,
on that
Nick.
too. What Justin said is like very key to that. It's a time commitment, and even like if you dedicate part-time hours to it, like 20 hours a week to it, there's no guarantee that you'll stand out. It's who you're connected to and the kind of content that you create that determines
Mhm.
if you'll be popular, and the chances of being recognized are the same as if you want to be a celebrity or a really famous actor or actress. You'd still have to go through the time to meet the right people and get the right connections
Right.
for most people.
Yeah,
It's
it's very competitive.
it's incredibly competitive.
And it sounds like it might be difficult to find that balance that we're talking about today as well. Nick, I'm going to go back to a question. If you'll just give me a quick answer on this one, a question that I asked Justin earlier about finding the balance. Is balance any easier once you get to college?
I think it depends on the kind of person that you are. Um, my parents were very indifferent. They let me kind of do whatever I wanted to do, but I was very passionate about school because I really enjoyed school. So for me, school was an ultimate time regulator. I couldn't play video games as much as I wanted to because I thoroughly enjoyed school. I did my schoolwork. I had tons of extracurricular activities. I did JROTC like 20 hours a week. So for me, I had things I liked more than gaming that I did, and I still do. Um, but I can see very easily how if you were either really into social media or gaming and you didn't have those activities or you didn't have the self-regulation to control just even to make a weekly planner, which I've only recently started using Google Calendar, but I didn't realize how much time I allot to just doing homework. Um, if you don't have those skills or you weren't, if you don't naturally have those skills, which I think I may have had the benefit of having, or if your parents didn't you raise you to have those skills, then you can be really enticed to just burn your time playing games. Or as Kim said, she has a friend whose son dropped out of college because they couldn't manage um, their time on video games. It's very easy to do, and I can see how that's very possible. When I don't have school, I'll play 8+ hours a day and not even look down at the clock. And by the time it's dinner time, I'll be like, I didn't even eat today, because I don't have any responsibilities or things to do outside of work.
Right.
So when my responsibilities wane, my game time goes up. But the second that I get busy during school, it goes down. But if you don't have that on-off switch, I can see it being a real problem for people. And I know that's a real problem for some of my friends. I have a friend who just um, broke up with his girlfriend because he's been streaming on Twitch for 20 hours a week. So it is a big issue.
Thank you, Nick. Kim, we have about a minute and a half before I need to wrap us up with some final closing comments and some instructions for next week. Do you have any final words of advice as a parent and a professional for any parent who's dealing, or for anyone who's dealing with the kind of issues that you've talked about today? Cyber texting, the pornography, the tech addiction in general. Any final words of advice?
Yeah, could you share my screen real quick? Because I do have, my last slide was on resources that are available to people. And I
You
think,
can go ahead and share.
okay. Okay, so here are some resources that I think are helpful. These are websites: Internet Safety 101, CyberWise, on guardonline.gov. Those are all very helpful to get information about these topics. Common Sense Media does ratings of movies and video games, and that's really helpful to parents because it explains, like, for example, if you go and look up Fortnite, it'll explain about it and it'll tell you, like, what are the things that you as a parent should be concerned about, what are the benefits to kids. Mayo Clinic has a lot of really good information. And I just wanted to mention the Lindner Center. They actually have an internet addiction assessment and treatment program. There's something called Restart, which is also on the net. But then if you look at the Lindner Center, it's called Reboot. So I would say if you are concerned about any of these issues, you would want to look at some of these websites. Restart has something for young people. I believe the internet addiction at the Lindner Center is focused on adults, but I'm sure they have counselors there that could help. And then the one thing that I was mentioning with Lamar Odom, one of the sites that has, and there are other ones as well, but this is one I'm familiar with, is Covenant Eyes. And that actually has those controls around pornography that people can load onto their devices.
Thank you, Kim. And thank you for the terrific information today. Let's go back to our regular screen if we could. I want to thank our partners again, Lakota Local Schools, Envision Partnerships, and the Butler County Morris Board. Thank you, Kim, for your expertise, both as a parent and as a professional. Justin and Nick, for the personal experiences that you've shared with us. Very much appreciate that. Again, all of the bios for all of our panelists and presenters throughout this series can be found on our website at www.c3ohio.org under the Events tab. I also want to thank all of our committee and team that's been working on this. You all do a great job all the time and appreciate all the time and effort. We have quite a few comments and resources listed in our chat room, so please save your chat before you leave. I also want to let people know that next week you should have received your email registration for the October 15th event, which is going to be focused on screenagers. That's a movie that you will need to see ahead of time. It will not be shown during the event, and I think you should have received that link now a few times. And that Screen Ages was created by Delaney Rouston, and she's a physician and a filmmaker, and she saw with her own kids how much time they were spending online and how much time they were spending with their technology, and she was very concerned about it. And she's developed a documentary about it that is fascinating and that I think everyone would really take quite a bit away from. We are going to have some activities focused on after the movie. So the person doing that will be Alexa Tabb. She is a social worker therapist who has worked with Delaney Rouston and will be able to walk us through that movie and be able to take some insights away from it. So we want to thank everybody for being here. Please don't forget to view the movie beforehand. If you need a link to that or anything, please contact us at C3 Ohio. And with that, Kim, Justin, Nick, any final words?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for being with us, and we will see you next week, 4 to 5:30 on Thursday, October 15th. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Recorders, I want to give you a moment to turn off.